behaviors that are illegal in person are also illegal online. Well, the problem is that in Canada, many of the behaviors that are illegal in person are things that in the United States used to be called free speech. So, for example, in Canada, if you misgender a person, you could be in violation of the law in large swaths of Canada. And if you say that a man is a man and a woman is a woman in Canada, this may be a crime depending on how you address that question publicly. So now they would like to extend that to the online sphere. That is the goal here. Sources say the government remains committed to putting forward legislation that will give Canadians more tools to address harms online. So they are pushing this thing forward. Again, this does not, what you're seeing from the CBC is part of a generalized push to destroy free speech in Canada. And that is not a coincidence. It also happens to not really be restricted to Canada. In the United States, there is a hard push from the left to radically shift the boundaries of quote-unquote acceptable speech. So, for example, there's been a very hard push against my friend Libs of TikTok. Okay, Libs of TikTok is an account, and all Libs of TikTok does on Twitter is just retweet videos of people who are nutty on the left. The people who say crazy, extreme, radical things and who are targeting children. So Libs of TikTok, for example, puts out videos like this one. This is a video of a 5th grade teacher who released a video on TikTok. She calls herself the Rainbow Teacher, wears rainbow glasses and rainbow hair because obviously this is a gay, bisexual, I don't know how this person identifies, but this is not a straight person. And this person says that she is really, really excited that so many students are coming to her and coming out without talking with their parents, without working through the issues. We're talking about 5th graders. And 5th graders are 10 years old. So she says there are a lot of 10, 11-year-olds who are coming to her and coming out of the closet. Libs of TikTok, of course, is to blame for taking a public video and reposting it in a place where people might not actually approve of the recruitment of small children into the LGBT community.
Yes. I have had multiple students come out to me, not just with their sexuality, but also with their gender identity. It's one of the reasons I think it's so important to be out and loud and proud, so that people feel comfortable coming to me and talking to me, because I don't know how much different my life would have been if I had had somebody to come talk to about this kind of stuff. My hope is that every student will have somebody that they can talk to about this.
We're just here receiving. We're not this is a propagandist. This is a propagandist who I'm sure propagandizes on behalf of the idea that boys can be girls, girls can be boys, and that the fullest form of self-exploration is alternative forms of sexual identity. I mean, I don't feel like it's a big leap from, the dyed eyebrows. I don't feel like it's a giant leap. Libs of TikTok, by putting this sort of stuff up, this means Libs of TikTok must be curbed. So there's an entire article in the New Republic just a couple of weeks ago blaming Libs of TikTok for a bomb threat, a fake bomb threat on Boston Children's Hospital. Quote, what began in spring as a succession of far-right attacks on all ages drag events celebrating Pride has by the end of the summer spiraled into a multi-city harassment campaign targeting children's hospitals for offering gender-affirming care, including death threats against providers and at least one bomb threat. Anti-LGBTQ politics has without question accelerated and shifted character this year to embrace outright political violence. Again, the idea is conflating the notions of traditional morality, and also, by the way, even if you're not traditional, the notion that you should not indoctrinate kids with this garbage. That is apparently a form of violence. It's the argument the CBC is making in Canada. Now you have many outlets in the United States making that about Libs of TikTok. And the natural corollary is that supposedly Libs of TikTok should be banned. This has been the ongoing harassment campaign by Taylor Lorenz of the Washington Post against Libs of TikTok, who apparently spends every waking minute attempting to get Libs of TikTok thrown off of social media because of the evil dangers of, actually taking people's videos and then just exposing them to a larger audience. Says the New Republic, these may be actors on the political fringe, and the tech-driven aspects of this terror campaign have sometimes been interpreted to minimize its real-world impact. But the narrative of LGBTQ rights being covered for child abuse is not just fodder for the right-wing clout chasers of social media. It has been weaponized by the right against their opponents in elections, from school boards to state legislatures. It has been amplified and legitimized by lawmakers like Georgia Republican Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, who in August introduced a sweeping bill that would ban gender-affirming care, and by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Again, the idea here is everyone I don't like is a violent threat. And thus, we must use the auspices of government and social media and big tech to shut them down. And this, of course, is now being forwarded by certain governmental actors. According to the Associated Press, in Montana, Montana's health department said Monday it will follow a judge's ruling and temporarily allow transgender people to change their gender on their birth certificates. The judge issued a scathing order Monday morning saying health officials made calculated violations of his order, which had told them to temporarily stop enforcing a law blocking transgender people from changing their gender on their birth certificates unless they had undergone surgery. There had been a law that was passed duly by the state of Montana that said you are not allowed to retcon history and pretend that you were born a male when you were born a female. And this judge overruled the law on the basis of whatever. District Court Judge Michael Moses said Monday he would promptly consider motions for contempt based on continued violations of his April order, which he clarified in a verbal order at a hearing on Thursday. Just hours after that hearing, the Republican-run state said it would defy the order and keep in place a rule that will disallow any changes to birth certificates unless they were due to a clerical error. On Monday afternoon, the Department of Public Health and Human Services issued a statement saying it would comply with the order despite disagreeing with it. Funny how all of the advocates on the left who are talking about how the Supreme Court is anti-democratic have no problem with the anti-democracy of a single district court judge forcing the state to now retcon birth certificates. And the goal here is a radical shift in social politics and the shutting down by law or social pressure of all countervailing viewpoints. This ties into, of course, a broader problem in American public life right now, which is the attempt to criminalize opposing political activity. Which brings us to this amazing story, courtesy of Ashley Oliver over Breitbart. Quote, a whistleblower has accused the FBI's Washington field office of using cases related to the January 6th U.S. Capitol riot to overstate the threat of domestic violence extremism in America, according to Judiciary Committee ranking member Representative Jim Jordan of Ohio. The whistleblower alleged the FBI did not follow standard investigative practices for the January 6th cases when it moved the cases to various local field offices around the country based on where the case subjects were from. Jordan revealed in a letter addressed to the FBI Director Chris Wray over the weekend. January 6 cases, quote, should all be officially led by the Washington field office and categorized as WFO cases, according to the letter. Instead, a task force dispatched instructions to open January 6th investigations to local field offices nationwide. The whistleblower told Jordan, quote, manipulative case file practice creates false and misleading crime statistics instead of hundreds of investigations stemming from a single black swan incident at the Capitol. FBI and DOJ officials point to significant increases in domestic violence extremism and terrorism around the United States. Jordan noted in the letter, such an artificial case categorization scheme allows FBI leadership to misleadingly point to significant increases in domestic violence extremist threats nationwide, which supports a narrative being perpetuated by the Biden administration. The whistleblower also alleges January 6th cases were inappropriately taking priority over other cases, citing an instance of being told that child sexual abuse material investigations were no longer an FBI priority and should be referred to local law enforcement agencies. The whistleblower allegation comes after at least two other whistleblowers indicated to Jordan that FBI officials were pressuring agents to reclassify cases as domestic violence extremism despite there being limited evidence to do so. In other words, this has been the goal since January 6th, is to broaden out the indictment of people who committed criminal acts on January 6th to include a bunch of people who just disagree in local areas, which ties into the 2021 narrative, for example, that school board being yelled at by angry parents over trans students going into bathrooms, that those school boards were now the victims of domestic terror threats. The attempt to broaden out criminal prosecution to encompass people you just don't like is particularly scary, coming, again, from law enforcement agencies that have been perfectly willing to play politics. In a little-noticed story last week from the Washington Free Beacon, Chuck Ross reported that the Russian analyst charged with lying to the FBI about his role in crafting the infamous Steele dossier was on the Bureau's payroll as a confidential informant, according to an explosive court filing. Special counsel John Durham revealed the FBI hired Igor Danchenko in March 2017, months after the Bureau first interviewed him about his work on the Steele dossier. The Steele dossier, of course, was crap. Igor Danchenko was one of the lead sources for the Steele dossier, and apparently the FBI had him on payroll. Durham charged Danchenko last year with repeatedly lying to the FBI about his work on the dossier, his sources for the discredited document. Durham alleged that Danchenko fabricated allegations in the dossier that the Trump campaign colluded with Russia to influence the 2016 election. Danchenko worked at the time for Christopher Steele, who investigated Trump on behalf of the Clinton campaign. The filing is likely to raise questions about the FBI's relationship with Danchenko, which ended in October 2020. The FBI opened a counterintelligence investigation against Danchenko in 2009, when he worked as an analyst at Brookings. A liberal think tank in Washington, D.C. One of Danchenko's colleagues claimed Danchenko asked whether he'd be willing to sell him classified information. The FBI closed that investigation after Danchenko left the United States in 2011. Then he came back and he started working for Steele's private intelligence firm Orbis. During the 2016 presidential campaign, Steele funneled the Steele dossier to the FBI, and apparently the FBI was using Danchenko to provide information about a wide variety of topics and paying him at the time that he was similarly dissembling to them. All of which is deeply suspicious. The weaponization of law enforcement on behalf of a political point of view is truly frightening, and it should be. And of course, this now extends to immigration. So, Ron DeSantis, last week, he flew some 50 illegal immigrants from Texas via Florida to Martha's Vineyard. And this set the world on fire. The entire left-wing media lost their minds. The legacy media, it was just awful. It was just terrible. How could such a thing happen? After all, this is a human rights violation, putting people on air-conditioned charter airplanes when they've apparently, we are learning, been homeless wandering around the border. Taking them, putting them on charter airplanes to the nicest area of the United States, where they are promptly taken in by the local residents for a grand total of 48 hours before the National Guard arrives to take them to an Air Force base and provide them all the amenities. Apparently this is a massive human rights abuse. It is amazing. The first move of so many Democratic officials is to simply criminalize things they do not like, without any proper cause, by the way. So yesterday, a Democratic sheriff in Bexar County, named Javier Salazar, he said that he was opening an investigation into the 50 illegal immigrants sent to Martha's Vineyard. This requires a full-scale investigation. So, no investigation on the 2 million illegal immigrants crossing the southern border. No investigation on drug cartels that are preying on people who are crossing the southern border by offering them work as soon as they get across. This is a story of Blake Masters in Arizona, the senatorial campaign, who's currently running for senator in Arizona. He released that story, that basically there are gangs that are going down to the border, finding young men who are crossing the border illegally, and then recruiting them into the drug trade. No investigation from Javier Salazar on that. No investigation on, the 53 illegal immigrants who died in the back of a truck in his county not all that long ago. But he is full scale on the case of the illegal immigrants who are put on charter airplanes to Martha's Vineyard and given snatch bags and water bottles. Here's Javier Salazar announcing this yesterday.
We are opening up a case with an investigation with regard to the suspected activities involving the 48 migrants from Venezuela. As we understand it, 48 migrants were lured, I will use the word lured, under false pretenses into staying at a hotel for a couple of days. They were taken by airplane. At a certain point, they were shuttled to an airplane where they were flown to Florida and then eventually flown to Martha's Vineyard, again under false pretenses is the information that we have. When you're playing with human lives of people that are already in a desperate situation, people that again had every right to be where they were but were lured under false pretenses, that does tend to bother me quite a bit. And so we are absolutely opening up an investigation into this.
Not a political move. By the way, he is an elected Democrat official. Also, he said in the middle of the same press conference that he cannot actually point to any law that was broken. Which, by the way, is that's how you're supposed to do law enforcement. You find a thing that you don't like, and then you try to hang a crime on it. It's like Letitia James, the Attorney General of New York. When she was elected, she's like, I hate Trump and I will find a crime. So basically, you now have the sheriff. He's like, yeah, I don't see a crime here. Like state, local, federal, no crime here. But Ron DeSantis is a big meanie who humiliated Democrats, so I'm going to investigate him. And this, by the way, made all the headlines, of course. You saw the New York Times cover it. You saw the Washington Post cover it. Wow, Ron DeSantis is under investigation. They all still have the Mueller fantasy in their head that everybody I don't like will end up behind bars. There will be fraud. You'll see they're frog-marching DeSantis memes coming out any second from the left. Here's the sheriff admitting, I have no criminal case here, but I'm going to investigate anyway and waste taxpayer dollars on it.
At this point, I'm not able to definitively say, here's the statute that they broke, either federal, state, or local. But what I can tell you is it's wrong. Just from a human rights perspective, what was done to these folks is wrong. The allegations that we've heard is absolutely distasteful. It's disgusting. It's an abuse of human rights. But I would like to find out sooner rather than later what charges, if any, are going to apply and to whom.
Well, wouldn't you investigate that before you announce an investigation? Like what the possible statutes that were broken are? That's not how you do law enforcement. It's a joke. Everybody knows it's a joke. The media are covering it like it's not a joke because, again, their fantasy is, apparently, everybody we don't like who humiliates us publicly must be thrown in jail. That's an amazing statement. I'm not able to definitively say here's the statute they broke, but I don't like it very much. It's bad. Apparently, by the way, the brochures that were given to the illegal immigrants had information from the Massachusetts state website about what you get when you obtain refugee status, which you get after you are granted asylum, if in fact you are granted asylum. Also, apparently, according to Ron DeSantis and the Florida government. Apparently, the illegal immigrants were given multiple opportunities to get off the plane, to not go to Martha's Vineyard. They said no one was promised a job. Everyone was given multiple opportunities to leave. Some decided not to go on the flight. Those who did make the flight were provided bags with snacks and water and information. An administration official said many who made the trip were homeless and hungry, and prior to the plane ride, they were put in accommodations for 1 or 2 days. So basically, they're given a free hotel for a couple of days, put on a charter flight to Martha's Vineyard. That sounds like a nice vacation, to be honest with you. I think a lot of Americans would like this deal. Salazar said the investigation doesn't have anything to do with the political affiliation. Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure that nothing. It's not politics at all that you are playing here. Get to more on this in just 1 second. Well, folks, the time is upon us for another Backstage, happening tonight, 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern. It's about time, because there's more news than ever to discuss. If you've never seen Backstage before, it's where I get together with my Daily Wire cohorts, including Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles, Andrew Clavin, and God King Jeremy Boring, for a roundtable discussion on the burning issues of the day. Jokes will be cracked, cigars will be smoked. Not by me, because I hate them. Libations will be imbibed, but also not by me. Plus, we'll be reuniting with our good friend Candace Owens, who's back with exciting news and ready to take off leftists more than ever. You definitely don't want to miss this Backstage. Tune in tonight, 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern, DailyWirePlus.com. Okay, so, again, the left prevailing take is, if I don't like it, it must be criminal. Whether we are talking about a take on LGBTQ politics or whether we are talking about Ron DeSantis shipping illegal immigrants from Texas via Florida to Martha's Vineyard. The thing they actually don't want to pay attention to, of course, is the wages of illegal immigration, because that might actually require them to take action. Instead, they would like to virtue signal about how they are into sanctuary cities without actually having to take credit for their very, very bad policy. This is a point made by the Washington Examiner. It's also made by Ron DeSantis' team. Ron DeSantis' team put out a statement after Texarkana County Sheriff Javier Salazar announced an investigation with no actual statute to back him. The DeSantis administration put out a statement pointing out that he seemed a lot less bothered by, 53 illegal immigrants dying in a truck found abandoned in Bexar County this June. The spokesperson for the governor said Florida gave them an opportunity to seek greener pastures in a sanctuary jurisdiction that offered greater resources for them, as we expected. Unless the Massachusetts National Guard has abandoned these individuals, they've been provided accommodation, sustenance, clothing, and more options to succeed following their unfair enticement into the United States. Continuing about luring people? How about luring 2 million people across the southern border and then basically abandoning them, which is what the Biden administration has done? It seems like a bit more of a problem. That's the point the Washington Examiner editorial board makes. Sending a few immigrants to a Democratic enclave inhabited by left liberals who mostly support Biden and are plenty rich enough to look after the new arrivals is an effective way of drawing a national crisis properly to national attention. It also puts those responsible for the crisis on the spot and asks what they propose doing about it. Not only is it Republicans who are trying to get Biden to pay attention to the disaster he has caused, the mayor of Yuma, Arizona asked the White House in May to stop busing immigrants to his small city of 97,000. Biden ignored Yuma. The buses of immigrants kept flowing. The Democratic mayor of Eagle Pass, Texas, reached out to the White House for assistance with immigrants flooding his community. Mayor Rolando Salinas told the Washington Examiner, "I'd like to hear a plan as to what they're doing to counter the possibility of a surge in people on the border. Nobody's reached out to me or to the city. I haven't heard from anyone." The situation in El Paso, Texas is even worse. Immigrants are sleeping on streets all over town. The situation is so bad, the Democratic mayor has already sent more than 50 busloads to New York City, over and above any sent there and to Washington, D.C. by Texas Governor Greg Abbott. Those buses have been arriving in New York since August. CBS News didn't bother to report on those. Again, 50 illegal immigrants arriving in Martha's Vineyard sets the world aflame simply because the left is forced to admit that its policies don't work. And so their natural, apparent response is to celebrate when a sheriff with no legal authority whatsoever to prosecute a non-crime decides that he's going to get himself involved in this sort of thing. Now, this should be scary to a lot of Americans. It really should. And it underscores the fact that sort of traditional Western values are being undermined in a wild way. They're basic values, fundamental values, like the value of family, the value of a border, right? These are things that used to be held in common by all Western citizens. Yeah, there are a lot of people who believed in freedom of immigration, that's fine. But the idea that illegal immigration is okay, or that a government has no control over its own border, is totally crazy. There used to be a lot of Americans who believed that traditional marriage was the standard. Now, if you say that in Canada, you might be prosecuted. And all of this stuff is, I think, one of the reasons why there was outsized mourning for Queen Elizabeth II. And I think that when she died, there are a lot of people in the West who felt as though something really important died with her. And that was a tether to the past. The left seems very hot and bothered about the fact that there are so many people who mourn for Queen Elizabeth II. And they're wondering why. After all, she didn't actually have real power. But the real reason why there are so many people who are mourning for Queen Elizabeth II is, again, we are part of a chain of history, and when you untether that chain, what you end up with is bad utopian ideas floating away into the sunlight where they burn up and fall down to earth like Icarus. That is what we are watching as a civilization right now. And so mourning the death of a person who is tethered to that past, tethered to traditional religion, tethered to traditional ideas, that is well worthwhile. The left likes to pretend it's not worthwhile, that it's really bad and really stupid, but in reality, that is something that is indeed worth mourning. Alrighty, guys, the rest of the show is continuing now. You're not going to want to miss it. We'll be getting into Don Lemon getting absolutely shellacked on CNN by a historian for the Royals. Plus, we still have to get into Joe Biden suggesting that inflation actually isn't that bad. If you're not a member, click the link in the description and join us.
Over the past decade, there has been as high as a 4,000% increase in children being referred to so-called gender clinics across the United States. I was one of these children. My name is Chloe Cole, and I am an 18-year-old former transgender child. I transitioned from the age of 12 up until 16 when I realized it all was a lie. My story is a cautionary tale. Children and parents across the country have been caught off guard by gender ideology. Discussions about transgenderism and gender identity went from being a relatively benign social oddity to a doctrine that has invaded nearly every academic, medical, and educational institution, seemingly overnight. How did we get to this point? How did we get to the point where nearly every pediatric institution in the country considers it best practice to remove the healthy breast tissue of children while administering drugs typically used to chemically castrate high-risk sex offenders? Raising these important questions is not bigoted, and the refusal of activists to give straightforward answers should be seen as a major red flag. People across the entire political spectrum who believe that this practice is morally wrong have been told that they are fascists or bigots for even questioning this atrocity. Others have been convinced by self-proclaimed gender specialists that this is the only treatment that will not end in your child committing suicide. I believe Americans deserve to know the truth about this radical and perverse ideology, marketed as necessary and life-saving healthcare. I was only 12 years old when I told my parents that I was a boy. Like many parents in that situation, they didn't have a clue what to do. They were scared and desperate for answers. They wanted what every parent wants for their child. You need to be okay and thrive. At 13 years old, on the advice of so-called medical professionals, I was put on puberty-blocking medication. And only a month later, I was given my first testosterone injection. The gender clinic presented my parents with the classic false dichotomy regarding children with gender dysphoria. Would you rather have a dead daughter or a living son? Given these options, what loving parent wouldn't choose to transition their child? Scared for my life, my parents were prepared to sign anything the doctors asked. This is not informed consent. It was a decision forced under extreme duress. At 15, I went under the knife for a radical double mastectomy, the kind that breast cancer patients get. This was after I was sexually assaulted at school by a male student. I just told myself to man up, but I lived my life in constant hatred of my breasts. I started binding, which deformed my breasts as well as my ribcage. I was afraid, and I couldn't wait to finally protect my body from the threat of further molestation. At 16, I finally realized what happened to me, and that I had made a huge mistake. I realized the beauty of motherhood was stolen from me by medical professionals who my family entrusted me to. I realized after maturing a bit more that a child does not in fact know who they are at 12 years old. I realized that I wanted to be what I always was, and forever will be, a woman. With this realization came a series of challenges that were far worse than the transition. Somehow, I had to get myself off these drugs and tell everyone in my entire life that I was not who I said I was. My parents were shocked and felt like they failed me on every level imaginable. My friends all turned against me because I was evidence that their beliefs were a lie. I was a joke. I was a fraud. I was many years behind in development, incapable of feeding my future children, and worst of all, completely alone. Even the medical professionals who got me into this mess now have no idea what to do with me, and they refuse to help me. It almost killed me, as it has killed many who regret transition. The big question still remains. How was a 12-year-old introduced to the idea that they could do something as ridiculous as change their sex? I was and still am the type of kid that never really fit into social norms. I was a tomboy, I was shy, I didn't socialize easily. At 11, I made my first Instagram account. I had unmonitored internet access. It wasn't long until I was exposed to a ton of LGBTQ content online. And I had never seen anything like it. You mean that all I have to do is subscribe to this ideology, and then I'm an accepted, celebrated, and valued member of the most talked about community on earth? Transgender people are the most celebrated subset of this community. I saw the unbelievable amounts of praise and attention they got online, and subconsciously I yearned to have a piece of it. With every milestone in my medical transition, I was given more and more attention and celebration. It was the ultimate high. Even in person, I got more attention. Girls would have crushes on me, and I would have people come up to me in the hallways asking to make friends, and it was unprecedented for me. I felt like a celebrity. Being a kid, I didn't know just how superficial these relationships were until they all suddenly abandoned me just for struggling to become who I am. Much of this gender confusion is based on old regressive stereotypes of men and women, which are now being reinforced with hormones and surgeries. Women can have short hair and be interested in playing sports and partaking in physical activities. Men can grow their hair out and wear makeup. It does not change their biology. The truth is, this practice is harming more and more children every day. What will we do to protect this most vulnerable group? Up until now, the media has been parroting the same ideologically driven talking points. Affirm, affirm, affirm. The closest I've touched to mainstream media is a Forbes journalist who wrote a hit piece on me calling basic human biology transphobic. There are many detransitioners speaking out, and they are ignored by the institutions most responsible for the search of truth. Up until today, most politicians on the left and right have done nothing but get into Twitter fights on this issue. There is no second chance at childhood, so we must do our best as adults to guide our children to pathways that lead to healthy bodies and minds instead of depression and disfigurement. No child deserves to suffer under the knife of a gender-affirming surgeon. America's children, all children, deserve better. Thank you.
And Harris Faulkner, and also joining us today, Kennedy and Jared Kushner for his first time on the couch. Welcome to, we are so thrilled to have you join us today.
Thank you. It's an honor to be with you. I've watched the show many times, but it's different to be here.
Amazing. Different. Awesome. All right, we begin with record-breaking numbers on the Biden border crisis. Agents now reporting 2 million encounters with illegal immigrants so far this fiscal year, more than 5 times the amount they had when President Trump was in office. But that's not all. We have also just learned agents have arrested 78 suspected terrorists at the border, which is more than triple the previous 5 years combined. Oh, but Democrats aren't talking about that at all. Oh, no. They're preoccupied instead with the 48 migrants that went to the posh and ritzy island of Martha's Vineyard. And now, Sheriff Javier Salazar, a Democrat in Texas, is launching an investigation into those flights. But Governor DeSantis quickly pointed out the hypocrisy in that. Watch.
I believe that they were preyed upon. Somebody came from out of state, preyed upon these people, lured them with promises of a better life, which is what they were absolutely looking for, to just be exploited and hoodwinked into making this trip to Florida and then onward to Martha's Vineyard for what I believe to be nothing more than political posturing to make a point.
Yet 50 die in Texas in a trailer because they were being neglected. Was there a freak out about that? No, there wasn't. You've had criminal aliens get across that southern border and victimize Americans, killing some, raping some. Was there any type of outrage about that? No. It's only when 50 get put into Martha's Vineyard, which wasn't saying they didn't want this. They said they wanted this. They said they were a sanctuary jurisdiction, but that was all virtue signaling, and not only did they not welcome them, they deported them the next day with the National Guard. Give me a break.
Give me a break indeed, Jared. So 2 million across the border, 78 on the terrorist. Where is the outrage? But 48 in Martha's Vineyard, and all of a sudden Democrats seem to wake up.
Yeah, well, first of all, I personally watch what's happening, and it's very hard to see at the southern border. I also, we have to remember these are human beings, they're people, so seeing them being used as political pawns one way or the other is very troubling to me. But I do think that if you go back to the time under President Trump, we had the lowest border crossings in history when he turned over the administration. And the border was secure, was very safe, and people don't talk enough about the fact that these people are lured in to these journeys by the coyotes. They're paying a lot of money. I think 80% of women are sexually assaulted along the way. They come into America, they don't have papers.